Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. Our guest today is a longtime scholar of spiritually transformative experiences, which are otherwise known as STEs, who has been in this field really since its beginning, even though he looks very young. This is John R. Audette's fifth Seek Reality appearance. We ought to mention the fact that his first two appearances were in Seek Reality's first year, and now we're beginning our 11th year, even though we look very young too. John's career history has been in medical and hospice administration, which is where he first met the fields. He met the pioneers, let's put it that way, like Dr. Raymond Moody, and he met him even before Dr. Moody wrote Life After Life, which was a long time ago. John also was honored to know some of the great afterlife pioneers like Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, for example. He is the great principal founder of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, or IANDS, which is the main, of course, group in this field nowadays. John Audette is a native of South Florida, where he still resides, and his professional career has spanned more than 3 decades of senior executive positions in hospital and hospice administration and physician practice management, as well as the performing arts and public broadcasting. I think he's a dancer on the stage. I don't know what that's all about, but John originally earned a BA degree in history and sociology from Augusta College and an MS degree in sociology from Virginia Tech. More recently, he's contributed chapters about spiritually transformative experiences and non-local consciousness to some scholarly books. He's very serious about it now, and he serves as president and CEO of Eternea, which he co-founded with Dr. Eben Alexander and the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was remember the Apollo 14 astronaut who was the sixth man to walk on the moon? John R. Audette has written his own book, too, on spiritually transformative experiences and what we can learn from them. It's called Loved by the Light, True Stories of Divine Intervention and Providence. It's now available on Amazon. He is a fount of information, frankly, and he's really a delight to know. So, John, welcome. It's lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you, Roberta. It's great to see you again and nice to be with you.
I always love to hear more of your stories about the early days when no one knew or even, I think, suspected how prominent this field was going to be someday. I mean, I was just, way back then, I was just a researcher. I had to know what this was all about because I had my own STE when I was a child. In fact, I had two. I had one when I was 20 as well. And I thought I was just researching this for myself. I never dreamed it was going to become, one of my major pursuits in life. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it became kind of a major part of your life too.
Well, great question. And I have to say that it began in 1960 for me at the age of 8 years, just 8 years old, third grade.
8 years for me too. So
Wow.
think about that. Yes.
Well, there's a coinkydink for you. So my friend, one of my best friends at the time was Mike Waters, and we were walking home from school one day, and Mike was rather depressed and not his usual cheerful self. And I asked what was wrong, and he told me it was his mom. And I was aware that his mother suffered a near fatal heart attack and had been rushed to the hospital where she was basically clinically dead, and they revived her. And she had come home, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, and I was going to see her that afternoon for the first time since she had been hospitalized. So I said, well, what's wrong with your mom? I thought she was all better. They released her from the hospital. So what's going on? Why are you sad? He said, well, I want my old mom back. He said, she's changed, I said, well, how has she changed? Well, you'll see, you're gonna see her. He said, she's like, all she wants to talk about now is God, heaven, Jesus, and the angels. And I said, really? Yeah. She says she went to heaven and met God and Jesus and saw angels. And she just talks about how much God loves us, and I want my old mom back. My new mom is a Jesus freak. So I saw her that afternoon, you know, at the end of the walk, we went for the proverbial milk and cookies, which was our routine. And there she was, and oh boy, he was right. I could see that, I could really see the change physically. She was all aglow. I mean, she had, I don't see auras, but she clearly had this beautiful uh, halo around her, like a yellowish golden halo. Uh, and she was just full of enthusiasm. I mean, she was as cheerful and enthusiastic as one gets. And so it's so good to see you, Mrs. Waters. I'm glad you're back from the hospital, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh, yes, honey, I'm just fine. I'm just fine, you know, and I wouldn't be but for the grace of God, you know, God's love brought me back to life, and here I am. And, you know, don't you ever doubt God is real. And so are the angels, and so is heaven. And I said, well, I got to go out in the backyard and play now with Mike. He's waiting for me. So I left, you know, but I will never forget that encounter with her. And it stayed on my mind as an impression that wouldn't ever diminish. So my first quarter as a full-time student at Augusta College was 1974. I'd been discharged from the Army around that time, and I was fortunate to be elected president of the sociology club. And first meeting, I asked fellow club members if they could suggest any interesting speakers we could bring to campus. And only one person raised her hand, and that was Kathy Tabakian, who's acknowledged in Raymond's book, Life After Life. It came out in the fall of 1975. And Kathy said, my next door neighbor, Dr. Raymond Moody, would be perfect. He's very entertaining. And I said, well, what's his doctorate in? And she said, philosophy. And I said, well, what do you talk about? Plato? And she said, no, he loves Plato, and he'll talk about Plato if you want him to, but no, he's been doing this really interesting research at the Medical College of Georgia, where he's a medical student, concerning people who were clinically dead and resuscitated to come back and tell their stories. You know, what kind of stories? Well, you know, like leaving their body and going off to heaven and meeting Jesus and God and the angels. And of course, as soon as she said that,
Yeah.
the memory from third grade came rushing up to the forefront of my consciousness. And I said, Kathy, I must meet this man. The Ring of Destiny. I heard it loud and clear, first time and only time in my life. And we met the next day. She took me over to meet Raymond the next day, and it was love at first sight. And you know, Raymond was the first one, well, he was the first one to do a lot of things, but he came up with the term near-death experience. And he loved the whole subject of historical perspectives on near-death experiences. He would talk about going back to Plato and even further. One story I learned from him was about Blaise Pascal, who is a French mathematician. In 1654, he had an STE. And I think it was about 15, 20 years after that, he wrote a book called Think. And it was about his STE, but also his musings about God. And he said something very profound for 1670s, I think, which is when this book came out. He said he thought humanity suffered from one problem, which was a God-shaped hole, a void
Yes.
within each psyche. And he said the God-shaped hole can only be filled by God.
Right.
So in order for people to truly know joy and to be able to weather the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in life, they needed to have a relationship with God, as he did because of his STE, as
Right.
Mrs. Waters did because of her STE. By the way, today is June 25th, and in four short days, Dr. Raymond Moody turns 80 years of age. And I just want to wish him a happy birthday. And everybody who's watching should do the same. please do, because Raymond, he's a little Buddha, he's got the best sense of humor. He's a great storyteller, and he's contributed so much um, to this field, and I would say other fields too. So happy birthday, Raymond, and may you live well past 100, because we need you. Nobody
Those are
can.
our first hearing this. It's 3 weeks later because we always film these 3 weeks ahead in order for Roberta not to go crazy worrying about, are we going to have this available on time? So that's why you're looking at your calendar in confusion. But yes, we
Yeah,
will wish him a somewhat belated birthday.
yes. Oh, okay. I see.
Happy
You're right.
birthday.
Yes, correct. Happy birthday, Raymond. So, just back to the God-shaped hole. It,
Yes,
it's a it's a
everyone has.
it's a
Yes,
profound concept. You
it
know,
is. Yes, it is. That's why
you know,
that's such a famous quotation.
I often say, and I think there's some physiological basis to it.
Yeah.
Uh, he never pinpointed the location of the God-shaped hole, but I think most people are aware of it.
Mhm.
It's a yearning, it's a hunger, a thirst to connect with something beyond yourself, something greater than oneself. And I often say in my presentations that there are really only two ways to live one's life. The first is uh, to believe or to know that everything you do, every earthly action, has some transcendent consequences and meaning. The other way, of course, is the opposite, that you're living your life just for this one single solitary lifetime and nothing comes after. Um, and depending upon how you answer that question for yourself, which is fundamental, uh, so too is your worldview or your philosophy of life. It all comes down to um, why am I here and who am I? And if you have a relationship with God and you know that God is real, I don't mean on the basis of faith, I mean on the basis of data, evidence. Study how an acorn emerges into an oak tree. Every stem, every branch, every leaf, every root, every piece of bark comes in that little acorn. How does that happen? Galaxies emerge from stardust. The Milky Way once was particles of stardust. How does that happen? How does union of sperm and egg, the zygote, emerge into somebody like Beethoven? Every single piece of music he ever composed is in that zygote. I mean, the potential is incredible. And how does that happen? Does that happen by accident? I mean, I don't think so. But, if one looks objectively at the whole question of God, I mean, put religion aside, because I think religion has done a lot of damage to God by miscasting God. My personal belief is that God is pure, perfect love and
Well, of
cannot be.
course it is. But the
Yeah.
thing is that just to finish your thought, which I think was a brilliant thing for you to bring up, that God-shaped hole is one which human beings have tried to fill with religions,
Yes.
which was beside the point. Religions are not God. They're human made. They're always human made. But that was that human effort to try to fill that hole.
Yes. Correct. And I'm not saying religion hasn't done some good, but I think religions across the board, for the most part, have defined God in very narrow terms.
And counterproductively, they have not defined God as pure love, which is what God is.
My book, Love by the Light, originally was called Affirming God, because that's the whole point of the work I've been doing, which is to provide evidence that affirms the existence of God and the existence of an afterlife, which to me is fundamental. That's the starting place. It's the basis for all social ideology. Right now, social institutions are in crisis, all of them, not just religion, but all of them, governments, um, education, everything is in crisis because we've had a complete breakdown of ideology. I mean, civilizations, societies, they come together around, shared set of beliefs, convictions, perceptions of reality. They seek reality along the lines of agreed upon interpretations and definitions, which is what Confucius was saying early on, which kind of gave rise to Buddhism. I mean, Confucius was saying, first you have to get right in your perceptions of reality, of the nature of things, so that you can get right in your knowledge, so that you can get right in your action. But it all stems from, first of all, being right in your perception, your comprehension of things. So, for me, we have only one reason to be here, and that's to love one another, which is what the great avatars, mystics, sages, and saints have said. We should love our enemies as we love ourselves, and we should do unto others as we want them to do unto us, the golden rule. It was never about the golden calf for the sages and saints. It was about the golden rule. So we're living in very troubled times, probably most troubled that I can think of throughout recorded history. I mean, I know we've had our crisis points like World War II and Civil War, and human history is written in human blood, to be sure. But when you look at all the threats that we're facing right now, people are crying for help. They're yearning for something that can fill the God-shaped hole. They're hoping to find something they can believe in, something they can trust, something that has enduring integrity. They're not looking to be sold a bill of goods anymore because they've had enough of that.
Yes, that's for sure.
You
Isn't,
know,
isn't it
and
surprising how people are suddenly waking up to that? The fact
yeah,
that,
it can't happen soon enough.
yes,
And the thing is, as I said before, we've got a 5 alarm fire going on here. All hands on deck, full court press, to right the ship before it sinks. I mean, iceberg dead ahead. And I personally believe the only way we're going to right the ship is by connecting with God, not on the basis of faith. We're fortunate because science gives us now a body of evidence that is credible, upon which to predicate our knowledge that God is real and that consciousness survives bodily death. You mentioned the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Recently, their president, the current president, Dr. Jan Holden, reached out with an invitation to contribute a piece to the Journal of Near-Death Studies, which I wrote recently. And it was a reaction to her commentary about, it was really a question. And the question was, should IANDS evolve beyond its current position of neutrality into a post-materialist point of view, meaning we're transcending materialism. To put that in common English, what she was asking is, should IANDS embrace the thesis, the hypothesis that consciousness survives bodily death? Well,
why not?
of course, because IANDS has, since it was founded, has been oriented around scientific objectivity. Obviously, the hypothesis, does consciousness survive death, cannot be proven using the scientific method to the complete satisfaction of science.
Okay,
However,
but may I just ask you, whose fault is that? Isn't that the fault of materialist science?
yes,
Okay,
yes, materialism has brought us to the place we are at currently, which is not very healthy.
which is profoundly unhealthy. You are being much too kind, my dear.
Yes, yeah,
Which is because you are a profoundly kind individual. But I don't, with respect, I think you are in a wonderful position right now. the question that they asked you is one which you have the authority to answer, and you can answer it in the strong affirmative. Yes, IANDS should transcend materialist science. Materialist science does not have the foresight or the brilliance, or frankly, the common sense to transcend but the notion of materialism makes no sense at all anymore. They cannot do it on their own. So IANDS should have the vision to do it now. Yes.
Oh, yes, that's exactly what I said in my response.
I love you. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
you're reading, but you see,
pardon me for saying that, but
I
yeah.
was saying this from the very beginning. I conceived IANDS in 1974 when I organized Raymond's first talk on NDEs at Augusta College, and it was standing room only. The Performing Arts Center was packed, and I received a download from Spirit during his talk. Don't get those too often, but with Raymond's talk came this whole vision for the association, and I conceived it based on the strong conviction that we had irrefutable, incontrovertible evidence from not just near-death experiences, but from a couple of dozen other phenomena
Of course.
that's
Yeah.
consciousness exists beyond the body and is not an epiphenomenon of the brain. Nevertheless, I was trained in the scientific method. I respect science and its methodology, even though it has shortcomings. And yes, the materialist model is flawed. It is the product of flawed thinking, and it did rob social ideologies of their soul. So we really did become godless. And,
but they also, godless, you are so kind, my dear. Did you say stupid? That word, did it pass your lips? They became
well,
scientific, in fact.
Well, I understand where they're coming from, and I don't wish to be too harsh because I get their approach. I understand their orientation. I can be a bridge between science, let's just say, hard science, physics, and spirituality, let's just say,
Is there a bridge? Is there a way to
metaphysics.
bridge that?
Yeah, there is a way to bridge that. Of course there is. I mean, the problem with science in relation to STEs is that they've been dismissive. Um, they've been reductionistic. They do not take into account the full range of phenomenology. For example, the near-death experience. Of course, you can say that some of the reported phenomenology can be attributed to temporal lobe seizure or cerebral anoxia. Of course, some of that can be
Of course.
posited as a valid explanation. But then there's a whole bunch of other stuff beyond that,
Yeah,
which cannot be accounted
totally
for.
agreed.
It falls into the category of the unexplainable. But when you add enough of the unexplainables together across a wide range of phenomena,
Yep.
you come up with a very strong empirical basis to develop 7 statements, which is what I did when I formed Eternea. So in my response to Jan Holden, to Dr. Holden, I said, I never was neutral in my orientation, and I'm the founder of this organization. I kind of left it in 1985 when I realized that they were pretty much wed to that neutrality position, and they did not want to go beyond it. And they were still at that time focused only on the NDE. And I wanted to, reach out and kind of encompass all STEs. And I wanted to take the firm empirical position that we had evidential reason to conclude that materialism is a flawed, erroneous paradigm and needs to be abandoned. Because what comes with materialism? Every man for himself. I mean, it's a full worship of egocentrism. This lifetime is all you have. This is all there is, and there's nothing else. So get while the getting's good. So that's what we have in this world today. We have a get while the getting's good world, short-sighted, that can't see beyond,
Oh,
the day or maybe the moment. And there is no concern about what comes after. My belief has always been, and I've said this thousands of times, the purpose of life is to optimize your life review on the other side. Now, it is true that there is no judgment. God, being of light, does not judge in the life review. So being of light only loves, gives perfect, pure love, no matter how much evil, how much one did that was unloving.
uh-huh.
Everybody is received the same way. But as I understand, I haven't had a voyage to the other side yet. I can only draw from the experience of thousands who have. I've read most of the books. I've interviewed hundreds. As you say, I've met a lot of the pioneers and been fortunate to be inspired by their work. So I'm like, I kind of put this cosmology together in the seven statements, and it's logically coherent. And that's why I'm doing what I do with Eternea, to try to get the seven statements accepted as the new social ideology. Because if we don't get on the same page from which we can derive the same values, the same ethics, the same morals, not based on, faith in dogma, but based on empirically defensible observations about the true nature of reality, we don't have a hope. We're going to become victims of the Tower of Babel, 8 billion people speaking 8 billion languages. So my feeling is, with the seven statements, that it's enough to fashion a highly advanced civilization, and we need to get on with the business of co-creating an ideal future for Earth and all its inhabitants while we still have time. We're running out of time from what I can see. So the life review, back to that for a moment, the being of light just looks on with love. Now, when you encounter this love, everybody who comes back says, they all say the same thing. They have no words. It's ineffable, their experience. The love is indescribable. They don't have the vocabulary for it. They know one thing. They want to stay there. They don't want to leave it. That to them is perfection, euphoria, bliss, nirvana, heaven, whatever word one wants to use. But they're like, I don't ever want to leave this place. However, unless you're pure, perfect love, such as the being of light is, such as God is, such as Jesus is, you can't stay there because you don't match the signature vibration or frequency. So in order to reunite with God, to reintegrate with the source, creator, from which all things come and to which all things return eventually, one has to match the vibration. One can only do that by being Christ-like, which is what the founding fathers said, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, when they formed America. In his 13 virtues, Ben Franklin said, one of the 13 virtues was emulate Christ, meaning, it's not that you believe in Christ or accept Christ as your Lord and Savior. It's that Christ is this ultimate exemplar, the ultimate spiritual role model. And if you look back at his teachings, he kept trying to say, except that you be like me, you cannot know the kingdom of heaven. Pick up my yoke and walk in my steps. The things I do, you can do, and greater. If you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain. So, for me, it's pretty simple. The life review, to optimize one life's review, one needs to be pure, perfect love as best one can be inside of a body and in the midst of a three-dimensional illusion. One has to be Christ-like, meaning free of ego. If there's a Satan, it's ego, because ego says, me, me, me. and to thee and to thee and to thee, but never to me. Ego is, I'm going to get mine and the hell with everybody else. When you're out of ego, you say, oh, we're all one. There's no duality. There's no separatism. We're all one. And what I do to my brother or sister, I do to myself. So that, in a nutshell, is where we need to move as a species, and quickly. So in my book, Love by the Light, I call for a global spiritual revolution or renaissance or reformation around these principles. Because I don't really think we have a snowball's chance in hell of getting through this mess we're in until we fill that God-shaped hole with none other than God. And when we fill it with, the best way to do that is to emulate God. And to me, it makes perfect sense if you look at all the scriptures and you interpret scriptures in light of that insight or that point of view. You realize the best way to form communion with God and the best way to honor God isn't to build these great temples, and monuments. It's to give love to everything, not just human beings, but animals, trees, the fish in the sea, the earth. All things are extensions of God. And that which you do unto the least of me, to the least of thee, you do unto me. And so, God is saying very simply, if you want to know heaven, then emulate me. Come from unconditional, no judgment and no ego. And that's how Christ did. That's what he demonstrated on the cross when he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They were coming from very limited myopic perspectives. And so Christ said what he did, and he won his place at the right hand of God. And we all can, but not until
The
we.
problem is the real problem is getting from where people are now to there. I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's beautiful, and that's why I haven't said anything. But going back to IANDS, they asked you such a golden question.
Yes.
And the answer is yes, IANDS. Yes. Consciousness is what you've got to focus on.
Yes.
Now, 1918 was more than 100 years ago. 1918 was the year that Max Planck won the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize in physics as the father of quantum mechanics. Do you know what he said?
What?
He said consciousness is behind it all.
Yes.
And nobody listened to him.
Yes.
That was the year they should have abandoned materialism.
Well, you bring up a great point, Roberta. I mean, the great physicists, David Bohm, Einstein, Planck, they started their work pretty much as either agnostics or atheists. And it was because
But this isn't about God. This is about consciousness. Because
correct,
consciousness is God. We got
correct.
to get behind the notion all the gods were
Yes,
created to fill the
yes,
God-shaped hole. But the God-shaped hole gets filled with consciousness.
correct.
And please let me just say this.
And that was exactly the conclusion, the conclusion they all arrived at, that consciousness was fundamental to
Yes,
reality.
but you see, he was the scientist in 1918. That's more than 100 years ago now.
Yes, yes,
He had the moment, and he said consciousness is fundamental,
yes.
and nobody listened to him.
Well,
So he
that's
had the
true.
opportunity. And for you to be the one to say, look, it's time to listen to Max Planck. Guess what? He was the core scientist.
Well, I think IANDS would probably respond more favorably to my point of view if my book became a bestseller and I became a well-known.
But they asked you for the question. They asked
And
you,
yes,
can't you
and I
give
did,
me that answer?
yes, and I was very grateful for that, and it was a wonderful golden opportunity, and I believe me, I took full advantage of it in my reply. I'll send you a copy of it. I think the journal's coming out in 2 or 3 months. And there are going to be others who are asked to comment too, who probably don't share my point of view, but what you're saying is so important about the early physicists, because when they look deeply into quanta, to subatomic reality, that's where they made the connection between spirit, the unseen, and the seen, between um, uh, consciousness and matter. That's when torsion physics emerged, which I think is the area of physics that has the greatest potential
You
to,
know, they ought to go to the Discovery Institute, which also is working. Unfortunately, however, they're working on it from a Christian perspective. All their scientists are Christians, but now they're discovering this, the source of and how life developed. They can do science too. A lot of people can do science if they get away from materialism. Materialism is the core deficit in
yes.
all of science.
Well, this nexus between matter and consciousness is the missing link that Einstein was looking for to to join general relativity with quantum mechanics.
But
And
matter, in fact, does not exist. Get rid of matter and you solve it all.
well, it
Does not exist. You are 99 point and then put seven nines percent empty space.
yeah.
Matter is nothing. It does not exist.
Yes, this is the three-dimensional illusion along with time and space.
It's only energy. Energy is all that exists.
Yes,
And
and
consciousness is energy.
what a great construct it is. What a marvelous, magnificent invention creator put before us as a proving ground for the spirit.
Yes,
Simply
exactly.
that's what life
Beautifully said, my dear. Look at
that's
how
what
beautifully
that's
you
what
said
life
that.
is. It's a proving ground for the spirit. And that's why I say, if you really, it's not complicated, it's very simple. You want to
So
know the meaning
simple.
and purpose? Love one another. Optimize your life review. Raise your God quotient to 100%, as Jesus did. Emulate Jesus, like Ben Franklin advised. That's all there is to it. My book elaborates on all of this. And I started all of this as a young child because I was always very sensitive to human suffering and pain, and the suffering of anything, including animals. And I said, there's got to be a better way. This is unnecessary. So my prayers always revolved around show me a way to address this, because I know we can do better. We can do a lot better as a species if we get the flawed thinking out of the picture.
Get the flawed thinking out of the picture because so many people are off on those tangents.
Yes.
They are distracted by so many shiny objects
Yeah.
that are
Yes.
just not even
Thank you.
real.
Thank you. Thank you. The golden calf is the shiny object, and
Yes.
we need to get beyond it. John Lennon wrote a song where one of the lyrics in the song, I think it's the Ballad of John and Yoko. He said, last night the wife said, "Oh boy, when you're dead, you don't take nothing with you but your soul. Think," which is the name of Pascal's book, Think, exclamation point, think. So, I mean, hospice was the dying patient, they were great teachers, as Kubler-Ross often pointed out. I was so fortunate to know her and to have her as an early mentor,
Yeah.
uh, because she saw it all. She knew it. She didn't equivocate. She was one who stood on the stage and said, "Of course, there's life after death. We have an erroneous perception of death. If we really knew what it was, we wouldn't fear it, and we would live our lives much differently." It's sad to see people uh, facing terminal illness who do not have their spiritual house in order, because they go through the dark night of the soul. They go through this mental meltdown, and it's very hard to pull them out of it because they don't have the foundational support. And for me, it's so simple. Look, if you don't want to take my word for it or read my book and take the book's word for it, go out and have your own experience. I point out like 24 different methods that people can safely get involved with that will bring about their own epiphany to make God real for them. Buddha said it pretty well. Just go look at a lotus flower or any flower and study it, and God will reveal. God will become obvious. You know, God and creation, creator and creator are not equal, but you can begin to know creator by comprehending creation. Creation is magnificent. It's elegant. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation, we can think these profound thoughts, that we can interact over this technology. I mean, this is amazing. Where does all this come from?
Yes, it's so beautiful. So
So,
magnificent.
yeah, so it's very simple. It's not complicated. That's the whole point. We've got to demystify God. We have to demystify enlightenment. There's nothing terribly onerous about it. And frankly, people are going to suffer self-inflicted wounds until they get it right, right in their perception, right in their knowledge, right in their action. They got to fill the God-shaped void, the God-shaped hole, with none other than God, which is none other than love. My God for a day, I end the book with a recommendation to do God for a day exercises. I could call it love for a day, but same thing. But my three, I don't talk about it too much because you do it anonymously and someplace where nobody knows you. You don't want acknowledgement, you don't want recognition, you don't want reciprocity, you don't give your real name, you don't want to be identified, because otherwise it sort of tilts the machine. The idea is to just do it with humility and with anonymity, and because you're being in service to God, in service to love.
Only, right.
And love, pure love, wants nothing. I mean, my favorite expression is want little, need less, and love more. So my highest highs were my God for a day exercises. You can't get higher than that because you start to climb into that rarefied air where you encounter God. Because the minute you try to bring God's love through you with purity of intention, oh my gosh, the seas part. I mean, literally, they do. You can you can work miracles. I think it's really the basis for all healing. In fact, the stories I've read about some of the great healers say, oh, they just have to get out of the way, let go, and let God.
Yes.
It's doing the healing. It's God's love.
Jesus always said, "You believe that I can do this?" And when the person he was healing said yes, then he said, "You are healed."
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it was done. Oh, my dear, we've come to the end of our time, but we'll do this again. Yeah, it always goes so quickly. No, thank you so much for being here. I always so much enjoyed talking with you. John's websites are affirminggod.com and Eternea.org. And how are things going with Eternea? Are you doing things there?
Eternea is fine. It's there as a placeholder because it's never been properly funded. It hasn't really been funded at all. So I keep it out there as a prayer. I describe it in all of its program components on the website. I describe what I've just discussed on the website, the whole theory for social change. And I wait for a benefactor to come up and say, hey, I love what you're saying here. I resonate with it. Let's get to work, in a real way. So we do what we can. We're minimally operational. And who knows, IANDS may take my response to Dr. Holden's commentary to heart, and they may adopt a post-materialist point of view and get to where I was at in 1974, when I tried very much to lead them in that direction, because I basically said, guys, this stuff is powerful. It can not only change human nature, it can change the nature of social, political, and economic systems. What are we waiting for? Let's go. Let's charge the hill.
Well, please consider yourself hugged, my dear. And once again, my beloved friends, we've come to the end of our time, and this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be with us today. Please never forget, that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you get that fact, and it is a fact, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, we're going to talk with Carl Unegbu for the first time. I hope that's the right way to pronounce his name. I have never talked with him, but he's a lawyer, a journalist, and a comedian. And now there's an unusual combination. He probably beats me because I'm just a lawyer, a writer, and an afterlife and gospels expert. I think he sounds more interesting than I do. He's written an enjoyable book called Comedy Goes to Court: When People Stop Laughing and Start Fighting. I've just looked at the table of contents and it's very, very interesting. I'll have read it by next week. It's all about what happens when the laughing stops and, you go to court. I can't wait for this conversation, so please be sure to join us next week. And this week, our guest has been John R. Audette, who has been with us for the 5th time. As you can hear, John not only is a lifelong scholar of spiritually transformative experiences, which we call STEs, but he's also a very intense guy who's really thought about a lot of this stuff. He's known just about everybody in this field, and he's done a lot of not just thinking, but also interacting, and he knew just about everybody. I mean, Eben Alexander, Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon. And he's written a book which is very good. I loved his book. It's called Loved by the Light: True Stories of Divine Intervention and Providence. It's available on Amazon, and I will have him back again because we haven't finished talking about this stuff. And as you know, our great friend Craig Hogan is the president of Seek Reality Online, which he has put together there more information about life and death and the afterlife than exists anywhere else. What, like it or not, your life really is eternal. So it's time to start learning about it. You have never felt alive the way you're going to feel alive after you have joined that website and spent a few months learning what you can learn there. So it's time to learn from my dear, beautiful friend, and your friend too, Dr. R. Craig Hogan. He's the worldwide ultimate expert on all things afterlife. And we're starting to do the same thing with Jesus's genuine teachings. After all, he did not start the religion that bears his name and is now dying because he never started that religion. And the dogmas of Christianity are not his truths. They're nobody's truths but the Roman Emperor Constantine. Teachingsbyjesus.com is your single resource on earth for all the beautiful divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of them all, Master Jesus. Jesus asked us to start a website for his truths. Now it exists. We don't have the time to give to it that we need to, but when it is time for us to do that, Jesus will help us to find that time and that money. Meanwhile, it exists, it's there, and it's for you. So come and learn from Jesus what he actually taught. The genuine teachings of Jesus can at last truly come alive for us all. And that's about all the time we have. So if you want to talk about any of my books, or if you want to talk about anything at all, you can always contact me through the green contact block on robertagrimes.com. I answer every email, but I need your correct email address. That's the one problem that sometimes happens. I write a long email and then it bounces. So don't make me sad. Make sure I have your correct email address. And all of the more than 550 past episodes of Seek Reality are available wherever audio podcasts can be found. You can see the new video episodes each week on Roku, Fire Stick, YouTube, and elsewhere. And meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being. And most of all, in this entire universe, you are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.